This is our March edition of the Cinetopia Radio Show, and we're doing this a bit in two parts today. So I'm right now sitting with Amaya Banuelos Marco, and we're doing this the day before it airs. Amaya, how are you doing? First off, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good. So yesterday there was a big Filmhouse, Save Filmhouse protest, and both of us, Amaya and myself, have been we've been actively part of the Save Filmhouse campaign, which is a lot of people. It's it's probably hundreds of people, and everyone kind of comes in and out of it. But yesterday there was a protest in front of Filmhouse, and Maya and I were both there, and I just thought, there's a lot of news coming out right now daily about what's going to happen. We don't, probably by the time this airs or by the time you listen to this, we won't. There might be new news that we don't know, so it changes daily. But I wanted to kind of reflect with you, Amaya, on what you felt like happened yesterday. I think it was kind of really nice to see everybody come out, and a lot of people we know. What did you think?
Yeah, same. I think everyone was sort of feeling the need for this, coming together and just reflect on what's been happening over the last 6 months. We still don't know the situation with the building. There's not been much transparency in the process. There's lots of rumors, and I think people are getting a bit fed up with the whole situation. And this also comes together with the fact that there's been a lot of tension with sort of like the budget cuts for arts and culture, and people are really stressed about this as well. And I think the film house sort of has become a bit of a symbol of what's really happening with the arts and cultural sector in Scotland, and losing it would mean obviously lots of things, not just the loss of an incredible space to watch cultural cinema, but also is such an iconic cultural place in itself. So if we lose that, how many other places are we gonna lose? So I think it's sort of like it's becoming really a symbol of the culture in Scotland. At least to me, that's what's happening right now. And so it was really truly beautiful actually to see everyone come together on a Sunday afternoon. It was also Mother's Day, so some people celebrate these, so they just come for this, which is great. And I think what was really nice as well is that there was a space for everyone to sort of reflect on what the building signifies for them, and there were lots of different voices. There were people working in the industry, there were students, there were social workers, there were just audience members. And I think it really reflected that the film house is a space for everyone. And yeah, I was really moved and really felt recharged after it. How did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if for people who are listening who haven't been paying attention to it as close to us, I guess it's good to point out that the film house went into administration in October and 2022, so it was about 6 months ago. And it was shocking. About 107 people lost their jobs across the both the Belmont Cinema and film house, like, completely closed. And there's really been a lot of active sort of campaigning to sort of save it, but there's a lot of not a feeling of not having any control. And even those who seem to be having in conversations with administrators or people within the government, and even the government, sort of counselors are putting these action steps within to sort of to press that forward. There doesn't feel like there's any way to do it, whether because supposedly this administration organization has been put on, to give the money back to the creditors, and that is, they've got to look out for the most viable candidate, and those tend to be what sounds to be pubs and private clubs and things like that it seems to be coming out that as possibilities. And it's really unfortunate because this is a cultural capital, and I think there were three speeches that really resonated. There was 3 or 4 speeches that really, they all were great. I really liked Paul Laverty speaking I mean, it's exciting to see Paul speak as well, but it was him talking, and something I've always really believed that a cinema is, and experienced a lot in New York. And so then when I came to
Mhm.
Filmhouse, I really felt this happened, and this is why I'm a bit obsessed with Q&As. But that the a cinema can be a place for forum, for public forum, and should be. And when you're, when you're showing certain kinds of films, such as documentaries or whatnot, we've talked about, many films on this program that really speak to important topics and stuff. And with the doc program that we're discussing doing, this is a place where people can talk back about these things, and it's storytelling, but it's also, a public space to talk around subjects. And I thought that was really beautiful, and I thought he expressed that really well. Of course, I have to give a shout out because I was, tearful when I saw it actually afterwards, because you sent me a video that you had recorded, and I missed the first part. But Undine's, message about just, it's I guess it's hashtag Dear Administrator now, but the administrator, a poem that was written to the administrators on what are they doing behind the, as this has been closed for 6 months and it's just sitting dead, and mice are running, across the, eating Kit Kat bars and whatnot. It was very lovely, but it was also very emotional, because it shows how much the community who's standing outside the building matters and cares. And if that message, whether or not the administrators care, if that message gets to them, I couldn't help but be moved, and I don't know who wouldn't be. And I also really loved, there was a young new programmer who had been part of the Edinburgh International Film Festival program this year. And I think it was one of the things that hit me when we started to kind of get involved with the petition and all the other activity, was this is the opportunities that you have in the city, to learn to be part of, a festival or exhibition and all that kind of stuff. And you take that away when you get rid of, a space like this. And that person got very emotional, but it was really beautiful and really put a lot of stuff into perspective. So I thought it was great, and I'm glad that there was a push to do this, and I'm glad that it happened.
Yeah, also I think another positive thing to take from this, apart from like what I feel to me was very cathartic, meeting of people believing on a space as more than just a cinema, is really a community hub. I mean, we're not going to repeat the same things that we've been saying for all these months, but it's just like also the people were really calling to the public to write to the councillors, to write to the MPs and MSPs, and I think there's been also a lot of sharing of replies and sharing of emails, which is very interesting. And actually, I also wrote to my councillors, MPs, and MSPs, and I've been receiving some emails. And I actually received today one from my MSP, and I might reply him back, but it's interesting what he says at the end, of like how he defines the Filmhouse as an Edinburgh institution that provides entertainment and jobs. And it's like, well, no, that's not my idea of the Filmhouse. Yeah, it does provide entertainment, but it does provide high quality culture from all around the world. It provides jobs, yes, but it provides learning opportunities. It provides a space for reflection and encountering. Is what you were saying, the Q&As. That's something that you don't get at Odeon. You might get it occasionally at Cameo, but the Filmhouse really had that rooted, because it was a space for festivals that really brought that into the programming. So I feel that the politicians sometimes are missing as well the point of what the cinema is. And yeah, I think it's really good that actually we're sort of calling them out and really highlighting that this is more than entertainment. It's not Netflix, it's not just like an outing. Is really a space that it really has a value in our society, and it needs to be protected as much as they can possibly do. So yeah, I think there's some positives from these protests, and we'll see what happens in the. I'm really hoping we're gonna find out soon, because it's just like this tension. I just can't take it anymore.
Well, I think the truth is nobody knows, and I think that there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, but it's it's kind of it's a fight at the last minute, and like it so there was a thing about a licensing being lost and somebody pulling out, but it was almost going to be a pub with a cinema theme, which is as depressing as depressing can be, because there's one across the street in a former cinema as well. And it's it's really, really a shame, because we're talking about a public space where many people felt comfortable to relax, to watch this art medium and all these things. And it's we don't need another pub, and I think that especially on that street as well. So I really hope things change, and I hope I hope we'll be coming back to you in April with positive news. I suppose the positive news to mention, and I feel like this month is a bit about festivals, because we're reviewing the Glasgow Film Festival, which rose in its attendance about 25% this year. So that's really, really positive. And the other good news that came out this month is that the Edinburgh International Film Festival has officially been saved. So the Edinburgh International Festival is taking it on in a smaller form, and it's coming out. And I think the person who's taking over as the director, right? Who is it?
Her name is Kate Taylor, and she used to be the senior programmer at the London Film Festival, and then last year she was one of the programmers of the EIFF, and now she's taking over as artistic director.
Yeah, which is very, very exciting. It looks like Christy, it's a big shift. So Christy is moving to the London Film Festival. So she was the artistic director last year of the Edinburgh International Film Festival, and did a great job. And the Oscars happened. We'll ignore that. We'll talk about that another time. But the festival is back, so we'll be able, in our own hometown, to be able to talk about that this year, which is exciting. But on this show, we're going to focus on reviewing the Glasgow Film Festival, and I'm joined with Garry and Simon in a bit. And then Amaya's going to come back, and we're going to talk about the Berwick Media and Art Festival that both of us went to in Berwick upon Tweed, and talk about some great films and exhibits we saw there. So our Glasgow Film Festival recap and special, and as you might remember, last month we reviewed Girl, the opening film, and I'm here with Simon and Garry, two of our regulars, but also really you saw lots of films at Glasgow Film Festival, many more than I did. So I'm going to hand it over to both of you to kind of give us an overview of how you thought this festival was compared to previous years. So how are you both?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having us back. I've had a busy old Glasgow Film Festival time. By the time this goes out, I will have seen 19 films, not including Under the Skin. Actually, I saw Under the Skin with a live orchestra doing Misha Levy's score, which was terrific. But yeah, a busy few weeks of film festival.
It's been very busy for me too. Thanks very much for having me back on. I've not seen quite as many as you, Simon. I think I was counting up earlier. I've got one last film to see tonight, which will be The Five Devils, and that'll be film number 11. So done not too bad, considering I managed to I've been working through the festival, and I managed to just kind of squeeze in a weekend trip. So I saw 5 films in the cinema, and then the rest it's been through the online platform, which has been really good this year, I think.
Yeah, I do have the advantage of living in Glasgow, so that's made it a wee bit easier. But yeah, I think it's been a really strong festival this year. I've seen some terrific films. Just out of what I've seen, I think my favorites have been How to Blow Up a Pipeline, which is a great kind of eco-thriller heist movie about kind of eco-terrorism, climate activism. And Polite Society is the closing gala film, which is just terrific. It's just great fun. It's like it's a bit like Scott Pilgrim. It's a bit Edgar Wrighty, but it's kind of about British Pakistani society. Really strong. And some of my other favorites we're going to talk about today, so we can get into those when we get to them.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, my favorites probably one called Prison 77, which I don't know, I'm not really hearing too many people talking about it, so I'd recommend catch that one somewhere. I don't know when it's going to come out, but that's Spanish. It was directed by Alberto Rodriguez, and it's based upon a true story just at the end of fascism in Barcelona in the 70s. And it's about this young accountant who gets jailed, and he kind of comes to terms with his sentence and meets an older kind of seasoned prisoner. So it's kind of got shades of Shawshank Redemption in that kind of central relationship between the young prisoner and the old prisoner. But it's very, very good, very tense. There's funny moments in it as well, but it's also really sad. I think that's probably been the highlight. And I also really liked Blackberry, written and directed by Matt Johnson. So it tells the true story of the rise and fall of the BlackBerry smartphone, and it's just done in a really fun kind of mockumentary way. So I really enjoyed that as well. And then my other highlight we'll talk about later in the show.
Ooh, good. Now I'm surprised which one. I'm actually going. I mean, we're doing this recording on the Glasgow part of the special during the Glasgow Film Festival. So I'm planning on going to Polite Society, but have yet to see it. So excited to see it after your recommendation as well. So today we're going to review 4 films that were part of the Glasgow Film Festival, but very likely you'll be able to see in coming out in UK cinemas and or streaming wherever you are, and or in the US or wherever, hopefully. So the first one was Carol Morley's Typist Artist Pirate King. Our second film will be Other People's Children by Rebecca Swatkowski. And the third film is Sanctuary by Zachary Wigan. And finally, we'll be reviewing Mark Cousins' March on Rome as well. So that is our special on Glasgow Film Festival 2023. So the first film we're reviewing on our show is Typist Artist Pirate King, directed by Carol Morley. It was the UK premiere at the Glasgow Film Festival, and it stars Monica Dolan, Kelly MacDonald, Gina McKee. It's about an artist, a British artist, Audrey Amos, so real life artist that was largely unrecognized during her life, but was later found to be quite an important or, an exceptional avant-garde artist. And it's about sort of a fictionalized, I would say, trip with Audrey up to Sunderland with her community psychiatric nurse. So Audrey has a mental illness. I believe it was schizophrenia or diagnosed schizophrenia and bipolar. And then, so it's a lot about the internal struggle of Audrey suffering through this, but also kind of this road journey to Sunderland with her nurse and how their friendship sort of develops. But also, it's in some parts funny and in some parts road movie, Thelma and Louise sort of style, and other parts very tender and sad as well. So I'd love to hear what you both think about this film.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting representation of an artist who wasn't appreciated until after her death. So yeah, Carol Morley discovered Audrey Amos's work in the Wellcome collection when she was doing a fellowship for the Wellcome Trust. And so she looked through this whole archive of artwork, notebooks, and letters that Amos left when she died, and discovered, this incredible artist who hadn't been recognized, who hadn't been, discovered really, and put together the film based on that archive. So the film has, snippets of her artworks that come up alongside the filmic narrative. The dialogue that Monica Dolan delivers is mostly based on like Audrey's actual letters. She's saying a lot of sort of direct quotes from Audrey's correspondence. So you really get a sense of who the artist was, which is really interesting. You get a sense of who Audrey was as a person, and it turns into this kind of psychogeographic tour of England as kind of the England that they're traveling through kind of warps to match Audrey's life, past enemies, Audrey sees, and people from her past who suddenly appear, and she wants to get kind of revenge on them because she's been a victim all her life. It's a really interesting representation of the artist. I have some qualms about it, but I want to hear what Garry thinks.
I don't agree with you in terms of it being an interesting interpretation of it. And I think it kind of falls in line with some of these kind of non-conventional biopics that we're starting to see more and more, whereby, they don't want to follow the conventional route of telling their life story. So we get like a kind of snippet, or in this case, a fictionalized snippet of their life. And in that way, it was the way that the art was kind of woven through the film, where they had these kind of like little montage sequences that showed her artwork, kind of similar to how they did that in that film that we spoke about last year with Benediction, how they put his poems in through it.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting to weave their art through the film that's telling the story about the artist. So I did enjoy that aspect of it, and I think like the colors that she uses in her art, kind of like it's quite symbolic of the kind of colorful character that she is, and and I think there's I enjoyed the way that they played with the structure, and also I also like that they didn't like it doesn't totally celebrate her. Like it shows some questionable sides to her personality as well, which I guess is like, obviously it's a result of her mental illness, but I think it says a lot about judgment and how people will initially perceive a character, and then the film lets you get to know her throughout, because I think people might react in a certain way to the way that she talks to people, because she can be quite sharp-tongued and she has these violent outbursts. So we see the way that the public react to her throughout the film, and I think that's interesting how it plays with that kind of perception that people might make assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a little clip because it had its world premiere, I believe, in Tallinn, and then came here, and I saw a little clip of Carol speaking about why she didn't go forward with a documentary approach and sort of and did a narrative film instead. But I thought what was really nice about this film is, as you said, both of you have said, is how the archive was woven in to a narrative film. And so you very much, so you're seeing the work in a way that you would normally expect a documentary to do that. And I thought this was really, really ingenious how this was done, and great to take it into this narrative form and kind of come up with a story around, as you said, the many, many boxes of archived material that Carol had access to, and turning it into the script that she did. I also think the performances were quite wonderful as well. And so did you guys agree, or what were your qualms as well?
Yeah, there's a real contrast in the performances, in that Monica Dolan is kind of this manic, verbose energy, where she's giving these long speeches, most of which comes from Audrey's actual letters, like
Mhm.
Audrey's actual voice that Dolan's able to tap into. But she's giving these long speeches, and she's very verbose, and she has a kind of manic energy. Whereas Kelly MacDonald gives a very quiet performance. She kind of anchors the film with this sense of stability, even though her character has her own issues, and is essentially being led on this road trip by Audrey. There's an interesting contrast in the performances that I thought worked really well. You know, it reminded me a little bit of Michael Winterbottom's The Trip with Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon. This kind of English road trip with these two contrasting characters who gradually learn more about one another and begin to see one another differently.
I'm interested to know what were your qualms about it, Simon?
I think it comes down to what you've already mentioned, Garry, the slightly unconventional structure. I think jarred with me. I haven't seen much of Morley's previous work. I've seen Out of Blue, her previous film, and I thought it had the same kind of off-kilter register to it. That has a kind of weird and kind of jarring sense on the ear. You know, the dialogue's not quite real.
Yeah.
But I think some of that also comes out of the use of Audrey's actual notebooks, and it makes for quite an unsettling journey. But that kind of works. Like it kind of reflects Audrey's, mental state.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of Carol Morley's previous films, and I know that she's a very acclaimed filmmaker. I saw one of her previous films, The Falling, which was on a Glasgow Film Festival, maybe about 10 years ago or so, which was the breakthrough film for Florence Pugh. And that was I think like the 3 films that I've seen of hers, can't say that like I've come away loving any of her films, but I think the way that she approaches filmmaking is always interesting. I'm always interested to see how she's going to tell a story, because she did another one called Out of Blue maybe 5 years ago with Patricia Clarkson.
Yeah.
It was like an interesting detective story that kind of like goes off into like some weird directions. So like, yeah, she never really likes to do things the orthodox way. So I think even if it doesn't click and it's not fully clicked with me, I'm kind of in agreement with you there, Simon. Still think that she's definitely an interesting talent.
I saw Out of Blue as well, and I liked this a lot more. This film a lot more than I liked that one.
I like this a lot more than I liked Out of Blue. But ultimately, yeah, like you say, Garry, I liked it. I didn't love it, but it's a really interesting film and a great representation of an artist. I don't know that we've mentioned, but it's worth mentioning that Audrey's artwork is very avant-garde. I think she describes herself as avant-garde and misunderstood. But it's very postmodern stuff. It's kind of abstract representations of the things she sees every day, a kind of diary journal approach. It's very collage. She uses like found bits of food packaging and kind of makes kind of postmodern notes alongside them. It's really interesting to see. I would have liked to see more of the archive, to be honest.
Yes, I agree, and I think that again is my documentary kind of interest and is very interested in the story behind the artist and her work. So for this to be a typically narrative film, yet get me interested in that story, I think that's where it worked really well for me.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's always good, like you touched upon earlier, Simon, is to like shed some light on some of these artists that didn't get the recognition when they were living. So it's good that they at least they're being talked about a little bit more, and people can get access to their work and enjoy their stuff, because there is she definitely has an interest in avant-garde style of art. So yeah, I'd be quite keen to check out more of her collection as well. So I'd be interested to see more of what she did.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Benediction earlier, Garry. I think that's a good comparison, because Benediction, which was at Glasgow last year, was about Siegfried Sassoon, who's not a forgotten artist, but the way it incorporated his work into the film kind of reminded me of this. So whereas that comes across as kind of a poetic, dreamy film, I think this comes across a little more nightmarish because of the kind of darkness of Audrey's mental state. Yeah, and it's well worth seeing.
Great. So Typist Artist Pirate King. So take a look out for it. Go see it, and we'll be on to the next. All right. So second film we're reviewing on the Glasgow Film Festival special, Other People's Children. Garry, it's coming out actually 17th of March in the UK. It's hails from France, I believe. Garry, can you tell me a little bit about this film?
Yes, so Other People's Children, it's written and directed by Rebecca Zlotowski. It stars Virginie Efira, who plays Rachel, who is a school teacher who's, I think she's just turned 40, and she's living her life single and happy to be single and child-free, which I guess can be considered a rarity. And she meets a guy called Ali, forms a relationship with him, and kind of forms quite a fondness with his 4-year-old daughter. And this relationship with his daughter kind of makes her question her views on motherhood, and she kind of goes on a bit of a journey around that throughout the film. So it's one of these films. It's kind of like it's told in that almost like the European social realist type of like style in terms of the way that it's shot and the way that it's filmed. It's kind of usually associated with like a working class narrative, where I think this one's probably I'd say that it's a little bit more middle class, but it's kind of told in that similar way. Very feels very authentic, and it's quite a tricky film to categorize in terms of genre, because I feel like it kind of like strays towards like it is funny, it's romantic, it's sad, but because it doesn't really lean one way or the other too much, it kind of makes it feel very genuine and pure and just very relatable. So yeah, I liked it, and I really like Virginie Efira. I think like she's becoming like a bit of a starlet of Glasgow Film Festival in recent times, because she did Benedetta last year, and she was in 2 films this year. She's in this one and then one called Paris Memories as well. So I think she's really great, and she won a César award a couple of weeks ago for Paris Memories. So I think her performance really carries this film and elevates it. What did you think about it?
Yeah, similarly, I loved it. I think it works really well, and I had the same trouble pinning down a genre for it. So for my take one review of the film, I eventually settled on romantic comedy drama, because it's a bit romantic comedy, but it's quite dramatic. It kind of defies categorization in that way, which I really liked. I don't want a film to necessarily neatly fit into a neat little box. So I really like that. I think what particularly struck me about the film is that it's a romantic comedy that just straightforwardly deals with mature adult themes. You know, it deals with sexuality, it deals with trying for a child, and it deals with having an adult relationship with other people's children, with being a stepmother in this case. And so a lot of the narrative drama is kind of carried by Efira, in the same way that women, you know, so often bear this burden when they're trying for a child or trying to get to know children, which is, you know, more expected of women. So there's kind of, you know, we see things that we wouldn't see in other films. We see her little heartbreak when she sees the blood of a late period in the shower and when she's trying to get pregnant. We see a kind of complex sense of envy when she learns that her younger sister's accidentally pregnant. So she portrays a complicated character a woman who doesn't want to be defined by having children, but wants to have children to take part in that kind of collective experience of women across the world. And it's all dealt with maturely and sensitively and thoughtfully. I really loved it and was really surprised by it, because I hadn't heard anything about it.
It's interesting you both didn't really place it into a genre and also called it romantic comedy, because it reminds me years ago, I think one of our first episodes of the Cinetopia show, we reviewed Claire Denis' Let the Sunshine In, and it was also being referred as a romantic comedy. And I always find it funny that French films like this get called comedies when they're about very sad subjects oftentimes, or adultery, or just like romantic sort of situations at certain but whatnot. But it is I can see that it falls within that genre, but it was very, very French, and turns out and very common, I feel like, in those kinds of films that I maybe have just seen a lot of, and that's the Claire Denis Paris ones that have come out.
I've got Claire Denis' Both Sides of the Blade in my notes.
100% Both Sides of the Blades feels very similar in that way. And funnily enough, I believe the cinematographer, because I was looking at the credits as they were rolling, and I just thought it was interesting that the cinematographer's name was Agnes Godard, and it's very French New Wave name, but then looked back at the work that Agnes has done, and is quite done many of Claire Denis' films, including Let the Sunshine In. So we're working kind of in that very similar genre, I think. And I don't know what we call it. It's just not, to me, they're not funny, but I love them. So I don't disagree that I didn't enjoy it. And I wanted to have this like French drama, when I saw this was on option, I was very excited to and I liked it as well. I think everything you both said is exactly how I felt as well. I think it tackled a really interesting sort of story, and the acting was great, and it was very, very well done all around. So
I think in terms of just not being able to pigeonhole it, I think like a term that I would use for this is just calling it a slice of life cinema. I think this is the thing, because it is like life. There's happiness and sadness, and like there's highs and lows, and this film really emphasizes that, I think, and it like you both said, it deals with very adult topics, and it doesn't do it in that kind of black and white, like good or bad way. Like you're allowed to change your mind, and you're allowed to have mixed views on things. And I think this the kind of the contradictory nature of the character just makes her very relatable and authentic, just because she's like, she's trying to stay true to herself and do the right thing. And I think it's a fantastic performance, and a really strong film.
Yeah, it's interesting on the question of kind of pinning it down, which I don't want to do. It's a film that stands on its own. But in terms of comparing it with other films, I thought it was really interesting, and I assume this is intentional, that the final scene ends with a version of Waters of March, which also ended The Worst Person in the World. So there's immediate parallels there between these two films. And I think Worst Person in the World kind of was also a romantic comedy drama that you couldn't really categorize. So I thought the film was kind of deliberately recontextualizing itself in terms of Worst Person in the World. So where that was a romantic comedy drama for 30-somethings, Other People's Children feels like the same, but for 40-somethings. Like it's got a little bit more maturity. And I came out of it having seen that final scene and having these thoughts, and I just wanted a double screening of these films like back to back to kind of compare them, because I think there'd be some interesting contrasts there.
Yeah, it's a good program idea and good good catch. I didn't even think about that, but that's a really good call.
I have to assume it's intentional because they came out so close to one another and they're so kind of similar in terms of themes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I'd mentioned the comparisons to Worst Person in the World in my review, and it's kind of like these.
Oh, great.
These kind of like almost like a delayed coming of age film, like in a way where like you're still allowed to be trying to figure yourself out when you're in your 30s, or in this case, or when you're 40. And I think like coming of age films don't always have to be the ladybirds, or like these kind of more like adolescents. So I think it's fair to have that, to have these moments of finding your true self when you're a little bit older than usual. That's fine.
Did you see the cameo by documentary director Frederick Wiseman?
I did not. Where was that?
He was the gynecologist.
Oh my goodness. I was wondering why he looked so familiar. And I didn't, and I then maybe I didn't see it because I was focused on Agnes Goddard's name in the credits that I missed. Frederick Wiseman.
I saw Frederick Wiseman's name come up in the credits. I was like, the Frederick Wiseman?
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing because he's a really good age now. I don't know how many like little acting performances he does, but I think I'd read that he pops up in things now and again. So I think it's quite rare.
Oh, I've been wanting to pitch Frederick Wiseman on doing something around the Save Filmhouse campaign because I think it would be an amazing
nice.
Frederick Wiseman like a 4-hour documentary, all the things.
4-hour piece on the Edinburgh film scene. That would be amazing.
And like call it like cultural capital or something like that, where it's like the destruction of the cultural capital of Scotland. I think he would do a great job. But now I know that he does cameos and
now he's working as a gynecologist. So.
So, what an interest. Oh, I'm gonna have to go back and look and see. That's great. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, totally shocking. Interesting. Good tidbit. All right, so that is coming out on 17th of March. Other People's Children. I think we all really like it, even if we can't pin it down in terms of genre. And check it out. So third film we're reviewing, Sanctuary, directed by Zachary Wigan, and coming from the US, I believe. Simon, tell us about this film.
Yeah, so Sanctuary, Zachary Wigan directing. It's a kind of taut, sexy chamber piece about BDSM power relations and the kind of shifting power dynamics of subversive and domination kink. It takes place almost entirely in a single hotel room over the course of a single evening, and it kind of charts the relationship between Hal, played by Christopher Abbott, and Rebecca, played by Margaret Qualley. So Hal is a wealthy hotel magnate. He's about to inherit his father's hotel empire, and he's a very powerful man who hires Rebecca as a dominatrix to provide him with what he describes as mental rather than physical services. So she's not touching him, they're not having sex with one another, but she degrades him, she humiliates him, she makes him clean the bathroom naked, and this is very important to him. This is a very important service that she provides, a kind of emotional service for him. But then he tells her that this has to be their last session because he's about to inherit the hotel empire and he can't keep seeing a dominatrix. It's not good PR. And so the power relations start to shift, and the whole film continues with this kind of tension between who is in charge and who is being submissive in that moment, and you're kind of kept guessing all the way through.
Yes, you've summed it up really well. This is the film that I mentioned at the beginning about being my third highlight of the festival. I really love this, and I think I love the films where they just there's only in this case there's only two characters. There's only one setting. It's all set within the same night in the same hotel room. So I think there's like so much pressure on the writing and these performances to hold their own for a 90-minute film where it's just the two of them. And this one is excellent. There's so much going on in it in terms of like the little power shifts, the subtle power shifts between them. I'm such a big fan of Christopher Abbott. I just think he shows up in so many great indie films, and I just feel like he's one of these actors who just never gets talked about enough. So I'm hoping that this one will kind of like bring him into the conversation a little bit more. I think it's really well shot. Like there's like there's a slickness to it. It's really stylish. There's some really interesting camera work, the way that the camera kind of like twists and flips. It kind of is representative of like the twists in the story and the kind of the power struggle between the two characters. I just think it's really well made, really funny. It was a really good one to see with an audience at Glasgow Film Festival. Big fan of this one.
I think it's well worth mentioning the camera work and the cinematography, because a film that takes place in a single hotel room could very much feel like a play. Like that could easily feel like a single act play, but it doesn't. It feels very cinematic. It feels very dynamic. There's a lot of interesting transitions, scene transitions, and the way it's shot, creates this expansive cinematic feel that really works for it. You've kind of gushed about Christopher Abbott. I'm going to gush about Margaret Qualley. I think she was the standout performance. She's shifting between different personas, even in the same scene, even in the same take. She's sifting between kind of cold lawyer, harsh dominatrix, and vulnerable kind of sexual partner. I just thought her expressiveness propelled the film, and there's so many close-ups on her face. She's got big expressive eyes. It's just never clear what's true and what's role play in the performance. I was astonished by it.
I agree. I think she's terrific as well. It's kind of been an episode for harking back to like films that are similar to, and again, one that springs to mind for me is a previous film that again was on at Glasgow Film Festival about 10 years ago. It was Stephen Knight's car thriller Lock, that only had Tom Hardy in a car for the whole film.
Oh, I love that.
And I think like the way that like those kind of limitations in terms of the location doesn't really inhibit creativity. And I think in the way that film succeeds, this film does so also. I love these like little taut like thrillers, this kind of cat and mouse dynamic between the two. Really hoping that this one gets a good release. I don't know. I don't think it's got anything confirmed yet, but I'm sure with those with Margaret Qualley and Christopher Abbott attached, then it's going to get a good release. So I'm looking forward to hearing more people praising it.
I think like Other People's Children, it's how it deals with the maturity of its themes that really attracted me to it, because I think it's very balanced, it's very smart in its depiction of kind of fetish and kink, because it kind of brings the audience into the mystery. Like you are not sure what is role play and what is actual imbalanced power dynamics. You're never sure. So like the participants in the role play, you're part of that mystery. You're actively part of the role play. You're trying to figure out who's on top at any one moment. So while it didn't have kind of the sensual weirdness of like Peter Strickland's films, I'm thinking of The Duke of Burgundy in particular, which is about BDSM power relations. It doesn't have that sensual weirdness, but it leaves so much unsaid, and it makes the audience part of the game. It really pulls you in, and builds that tension in a very kind of charged and kind of sexual way. It's just a terrific depiction of these kinds of imbalanced power relations.
Totally agree. Yeah, there's like that kind of balance of class and privilege, and yeah, there's a lot going on, and the way that the film kind of reveals these details throughout, and then there's kind of like these rug pull moments where it completely flips things around. It's just you never quite know what's going to happen next, and it can be quite rare actually now, I think, for when you're halfway through a film and you have no idea where it's going to go or how it's going to end.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I think it definitely deserves plaudits for that.
Yeah, constantly waiting to have the rug pulled on you again, and assuming that it will be pulled on you again. I don't want to spoil anything, but I didn't particularly like the ending. I could have had it end 5 minutes before it did, and I would have been happier.
Okay, yeah, I think there's one of the kind of that the type of film where there is like kind of like a couple of endings to it, where you think it might end and then it kind of continues on a bit and think it's going to end again. So yeah, but yeah, I think minor flaw. There's so many more. Like there's a lot of positives that weigh out the negative.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So final film we're reviewing today is Mark Cousins' second film of Glasgow Film Festival. There were two of Mark Cousins' films coming out the Glasgow Film Festival. This is the second one, called March on Rome. And Simon, give us what is this film?
So this film is a documentary film where Mark Cousins kind of analyzes and does a close reading of some early Italian fascist propaganda films, mainly Arnot, which is a 1922 film directed by Umberto Paradisi. But he's looking at how Italian fascist propaganda covered the rise of fascism in Italy in the 1920s, how it covered the downfall of fascism after Mussolini was overthrown and ultimately killed, and then draws on the parallels between that and what's going on today. So the main thrust of the film is, like I say, a close reading of Arnot, which is a film that covered the 1922 March on Rome, when Benito Mussolini's fascist party, when his black shirts, marched into Rome and planned an insurrection, basically, to take over the capital. And Cousins is looking at how the propaganda film was used to distort, like, how many people were there, what the crowds were like, what the black shirts actually did in the city. I found it a really interesting reading. I just liked his method of kind of calm, matter-of-fact narration and analysis of these old films that kind of get to the kind of tricks that the fascists use to make themselves look bigger, to puff themselves up. To give an example, he gives the example of a casual lie at the start of the film about what date the March on Rome took place. They say it took place a few days earlier than it actually did, because the date they actually marched was raining, and they didn't want the fascists in the film to be associated with kind of mud and trudging through the mud and getting all wet in the rain. So it's just this casual lie that kind of exposes how fascism wants to be seen, how fascists want to portray themselves. And it's that kind of little insight that I found really interesting about the film.
Yeah. I mean, also there was a line, I guess it was on something, but it was in the subtitles, subtitled from Italian, that it says something like cinema is one of the greatest weapons or something. Did you see that?
Yes, I actually made a note of that.
Yes.
Cinema is the most powerful weapon.
That exactly, and that hit me. I think you mentioned Mark Cousins' narration, and I don't know how many of Mark Cousins' films you've seen, but I've seen a lot, and oftentimes they're very soothing. I'm just watching the story of film, and just recently I saw The Next Generation because it's on Netflix.
I put that on Netflix and just sort of relax to it.
Exactly.
He's
Go ahead.
got a calm Northern Irish brogue.
Yeah. So, and I write down the films that I absolutely should see, and I love them for that. But this is really one of my favorite films I've seen of his so far, I think, because of, taking a historical moment like this and through the lens of cinema, and how fascism has been represented over time, or how people responded to it, and also, as you said, bringing it to the modern day, and how certain leaders are using fascism as an example, and how scary that is. This is a great use of a very particular archive as well, and I thought what worked really, really well in a way of telling history, and a specific history that predates World War II, but World War II as well. And I really liked this film, and the subjective way of discussing both cinema, archive, and history, and how they all relate, and catching those moments where propaganda film is tricking you and talking through that. And it was really fascinating.
That's it. It's a great example of reading politics from cinema in a way that not only focuses on cinema and kind of cinematic techniques like camera movements and positioning of tripods and stuff, but in a way that also reads the politics into it in a really interesting way. I like that he doesn't try and impose parallels between the fascist propaganda of the 20s and today's modern fascist propaganda. He kind of lets the parallels speak for themselves.
Yeah.
So he's kind of like Claude Lanzmann in that respect, in that he's just letting people talk. He's letting the fascists show themselves. Because while he does show clips of like Trump and Bolsonaro and Le Pen, it's always just presenting what they have actually said.
Right.
So there's a clip of Trump being interviewed about when he quoted Benito Mussolini saying something, and the interview is just letting Trump hang himself on his own words, really, talking about, why did you quote this fascist leader?
Yeah, exactly. And similarly, I can't remember who it was that virtually quoted verbatim as well, the same thing that Mussolini said as well in the end. So no,
I think that was Bolsonaro at the end as well.
Right. So that was completely fascinating. But I've not seen it. Like I love the connection you made with Lanzmann, but I do have like a particular fascination with World War II cinema, and I've not seen a film that has really articulated what you just said about, explaining how propaganda films work in this way, and in such an exceptional way. I think this was really good. It's really important watch, and also ask questions around things like art, or what places and public spaces that exist in cities that were built by people like Mussolini, and whether or not they do we cover it up, or do we do we keep it there to remember? And I think that was also a really interesting part of the story, or the conversation in this film as well.
Yeah, that discussion of kind of the relics of fascist heritage, and what do you do with them? Do you knock down this statue that is dedicated to Mussolini? Do you knock down this building that is built, in kind of Mussolini's image? What do you do with it? It is an interesting discussion. Yeah, I think it's a rare film that not only is entertaining in its own right and important, but that actually teaches you, how to read films. Like you come out of it educated, having learned a little bit about watching films and analyzing films and analyzing this kind of propaganda.
Yeah, absolutely. A very important watch, a really interesting watch. It's something I will hopefully watch again, to learn more, and
Yeah.
definitely recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the surprise highlights of the festival for me.
Yeah, great. Well, that's March on Rome, and it's very likely. I think, I'm not sure if it's movie or Dog Wolf, but I'm guarantee it'll be coming out in the UK soon. Okay, and we're back, and so we're going to be talking a little bit about Berwick Media and Art Festival, which happened a couple weeks ago, but it's a good time to talk about it because one of the films we're reviewing that was part of the Berwick Festival, Film Festival, is now going to be a Glasgow Short Film Festival, Hello Dankness, so we'll talk about that, and you should definitely catch it at the Glasgow Short Film Festival, which is happening in the end of this month, as well as the bonus Hippodrome Silent Film Festival. So more film festivals this month. It's just, we're full of film festivals in the area, and they're really wonderful ones. But Amaya, you have you've been going to this festival, Berwick Art and Media Festival, for a bit of time. In fact, you volunteered, I think, one year. So tell us a little bit about this festival and how it's evolved over time.
Yeah, well, I really don't know the whole history, but it's been, so the Berwick Film and Media Arts Festival this year was its 18th edition, and it used to be in September, and this is the first time that is happening in April, so they changed dates, so they didn't have an edition last year. And I think this is quite an interesting thing to talk about as well, because like dates for festivals, maybe for audiences they seem like they don't think about it, but actually it's very strategic. And I think maybe one of the reasons, I don't know, but I'm thinking maybe one of the reasons is to avoid clashing with another sort of similar festival to Berwick in a way, which is the Open City Documentary Festival in London. That one is focused in documentary, but a type of documentary festival, more like creative experimental. And obviously Berwick Film Media Arts Festival has both fiction and documentary, or anything in between. Is a festival really to explore really the idea of cinema, and they are focusing on new cinema and artist moving image, and within those terms there's also a lot of digging that you can do, and exploration of what each term mean. But also in terms of the days, and I think we talk about this, it only happened during a weekend and coincided with the Glasgow Film Festival, which I think maybe, I don't know how were their audiences this year for the Berwick Film Festival, but it's a festival that really attracts audiences from outside of the city, of the town.
Yeah.
So many of those audiences come from Edinburgh, like ourselves, but also from Newcastle, which is really close to Berwick, and Glasgow. So I don't know how it's gonna work for them in the long term, because obviously it's a clash in dates. But at the same time, very different festivals, Glasgow Film Festival to Berwick. So I don't know if actually it's a conflict there for specialized audiences. But anyway, apart from the dates, I just wanted to say that this is a very interesting festival in terms of where it's located. So it's as Amanda said, it's located in Berwick-upon-Tweed, which is a town bordering, is let's say the first town after the border is in England, but it's very close to Scotland. And is kind of nice how it actually really explores that idea of border within the cinema, like the borders between film, between fiction and documentary. And I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about that with the films. But also I wanted just to mention very briefly that a couple of years ago, the festival underwent a sort of critical self-examination. And this was under the head of programming at the time, who was Gemma Desai. And this led to some fundamental changes, such as, for example, they had a really long questioning about the meaning of juries, awards, and the whole selection process in festivals, and how film curators of festivals can actually better care for both the films they select, but also for the filmmakers whose work is selected. And also this was very interesting at the time, because they had an open Word document where they were feeding their sort of brainstorming and thought processes, and then they share that with people. And I think that was something very unique of the festival, and I never seen that happening before. Yeah. And actually, I think it's very refreshing that a festival takes some time to actually reflect on things that are very established. Like, we have the idea of what a film festival is, with competition, awards, and celebrities and so on, or not. But like, there's a sort of hierarchical structure around festivals. And Berwick had this sort of self-examination. And actually, this ethos has been sort of maintained, which is also very interesting. So, for example, the new Cinema Awards, which is a big strand in the festival, is not a competitive section. So all of the 24 filmmakers that were selected in that strand, they all receive a fee. So there was no award, but they all receive a fee. And in the welcoming, sort of the introduction text by Peter Taylor, then he also mentions things around they are not contracting freelancers for the festival, but everyone is on a contract. They reduced the program and actually paid more to the filmmakers. So I think it's really interesting to see a festival taking this forward and making the changes that a whole industry needs to do, because it's an industry that really tends to exploit its workers, really, and people that really love to work for festivals, and they take on like crazy amounts of work for little pay, and filmmakers basically give their work for free and they don't get much in return. So I think it's very valuable to mention this about the Berwick Film Festival. And I am really excited to see how it's actually going to develop and improve on these ideas. But yeah, just to mention on the new Cinema Awards, if I can start talking about one of the films that I really liked, which was Aqueronte by Manuel Muñoz Molina. And this is a sort of, it's a short film. I think it's medium length, you could say. But it's a film that was world premiere at Rotterdam this year, and it received an award there. And it's also been part of the True Falls Festival. So it's doing quite well in the sort of festival circuit. But I really love this film. It's very interesting in the way it's made, but I'm just gonna quickly talk about the synopsis. So it's a film that takes place on a ferry boat that crosses passengers from one shore to another. And the river so it's shot in the river Guadalquivir, which is a river that flows through the south of Spain. It's quite long. And the film is really composed of close-ups. So we see a group of people, which are the passengers, and they're all unfamiliar to each other, and they're making this journey, and we just get snippets of their conversations. But this journey that in reality takes only 3 minutes, because it's just a river, it takes a whole day. So from dawn to dusk. So the film is actually very interesting in how it's made, as I said, because the sort of sound is very clever, how the filmmakers use the sound editing. it kind of feels like we are sort of eavesdropping the conversations, because we see the close-ups, but then the sound is louder, and so it really creates an immersive experience. It's very beautifully shot as well, and then I really like the whole exploration of the river. So it's obviously the name of the river, Acheronte, refers to the Acheron River, which in Greek mythology is often depicted as this entrance to the underworld, and the souls were ferried across. So we see all of these people, and we also overhear some conversations about death, and it has sort of that metaphor about, you know, death and going to another dimension. But also just thinking about, again, Berwick upon Tweed and this festival, I thought it was really clever that this film got programmed, because, you know, the town is like by this river, which also acts as a border between Scotland and England. And so this film is sort of embodying this idea of the border, and all of these people are sort of in a place of meditation and reflection, and they're between two spaces, and they never get to the other side. So yeah, the more I think about this film, the more I like it. But on a first viewing, I just really love how immersive it was. It's very beautiful, and as I said, just incredible sound editing. So yeah, I really recommend. I think this film is gonna probably be seen in other festivals, because it's quite interesting, and I think also is sort of, again, talking about this border idea between fiction and documentary as well, which you and I really like, these bordering film genres. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight this. This was one of the films that I really enjoyed from this year's Berwick Film and Media Arts Festival. Do you have any highlights, Amanda, that you saw?
Well, first, I just want to say that I really loved getting to go into the town and, and seeing this festival for the first time. And what's really great about this festival, which I was, I really like Alchemy Film Festival as well. And hopefully sometime we'll talk about Alchemy and be able to review that as well. But I love how they take various spaces within the town and repurpose them and create these immersive artistic sort of places. And we went to one that was, I think, an old gymnasium, and it was, there was a New Zealand film from New Zealand that was across two screens, and just a really fantastic sort of way to explore media and find it. So it's a little bit of a a treasure hunt through a town, and it's not like it's it's international film, and it's really interesting, engaging film. So I really liked the exhibition part of that, and I'm glad we got to see that in person and explore that. It was really, really fun. And I loved going to the Maltines for the first time, the venue that houses most of the screenings. But of course, I would say that, I would like to sort of, one film I was excited to see and mentioned briefly was Soda Jerk's Hello Dankness. And that film I saw on the Saturday that we went. And, I'd heard of Soda Jerk, and I'd heard that, they had been at the Berlinale a couple months before. They're in Manchester. And as we mentioned, they'll be at the Glasgow Short Film Festival. And I really, as you were saying, this blend of different kinds of hybrid genres, this film really exemplifies that. And it was nice that Soda Jerk is actually the way that Berwick curators called it. They call them renegade remixologists, and I love that. It sort of sounds like a nice cocktail or something. But it's they take footage from Hollywood films, people and famous people you would have seen, such as Tom Hanks or Seth Rogen and whatnot, and they literally pirate I mean, so it's fun that you can get away with this and get it at the, a film festival, but they take those filmed clips and re-edit them in a, in a renegade sort of way, and appropriate the stories and remix them. And in this case with Hello Dankness, they were really focusing on the genre of, you would say, zombie films, and I think like drug films, so hence Seth Rogen and whatnot. So like sort of stoner films, or what they mean, like. And the reason why they did is because they were commenting on the period of time between 2016 and basically COVID, during like when Trump had been elected, and the Me Too movement had come about, and then obviously what COVID had happened and whatnot, and how strange this time was. It was like being in a zombie apocalypse for people. And so there was this assembling hundreds of different clips and remixing them and kind of commenting on it and using it, and it was quite humorous, but it was also quite poignant as well. I think what was really interesting is that they called themselves rogue documentarians, and I can see how they would say that. I also really liked that they, sort of considered all of these pieces historical artifacts. So that's why they're sort of documentary filmmakers, and that's what they said during the Q&A. And that that this was really to reflect the strangeness of our time that we live in. And you could really feel it was very palpable in the room, how people were laughing, and it was funny, it was entertaining, but it was really like a great commentary about how we felt during that time, where it was just being hit with one more, what seemed quite insane, or like zombie apocalypse. It really did feel like we were going through that. So what did you think? You saw that as well, Amaya, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought it was so refreshing to see a film like this. Yes, it's as you said, it's just such a clever twist on I mean, and I think also because we had some time in between the pandemic, I think we can really like look at it now through this sort of humorous angle. But just in terms of like a political documentary as well, it was just brilliant reflection on the Trump era. And I was just amazed about how the whole thing got made. I mean, I'm sure you were also thinking about licensing and all of that. And as we know that this is very expensive. And but also just the whole deep fake thing was brilliant, because I was like, how did they do that? And I think it's just such a clever, because we live in the era of the memes. So it's just like, I think audiences are used to see this sort of repurposing material with different narratives, and then you get to see a whole film that is actually commenting on a political era, commenting on society very specifically, and through also something I don't know if you mentioned, but like it's all set in the suburbs of America. So I thought that was also very interesting, because it's such a sort of example, right? Like when you think about the classic American film sort of thing, it sort of happens in the suburbs. The whole film takes scenes from different films that take place in American suburbs. And just like the amount of things that happen in American suburbs is just, I thought I really enjoyed watching this film. It really made me think about also the future of film, to be honest, like what's going to happen when we can actually do a deep fake where we can just put an actor that is dead, acting in a new film. So it has so many layers. This film is so brilliant. I don't think I can really like just summarize how brilliant the film is. So I just urge everyone in Glasgow and Edinburgh to just go and check it out at the Glasgow Film Festival, because you're just going to have a great time and also just think a lot about different stuff. So brilliant.
No, it's great that you brought up that it does take place mostly in the suburbs. And I think, again, they were mentioning the the types of genres that they thought felt fitting for the times that we live in, but also that they were they're in the 90s when a lot of these films, there were some that came out in the 80s, I think, in the 90s, there was a lot of films, around suburb life. And so like, American Beauty was one that sort of is clipped out of, and so and then repurposing it for today's times, and sort of, and hearkening back to this ideal dream, but then how insane it felt. So how strange and memeable, like our lives are now and stuff. So yeah, I agree with you. Let's urge people to watch that film. We saw a couple other films as well, and I think you wanted to together we saw, and you wanted to talk about a few more as well that we saw, right?
Yeah, so just I think we wanted to talk about the Portuguese film Wolf and Dog. So it's the first feature film by Cláudia Barejão, who's a Portuguese filmmaker, and she's made documentary films before. So this is her first feature film, and it's a very beautiful film, beautifully shot. It focuses on the queer communities of the São Miguel Island, which is the biggest island on the Azores archipelago. So the whole setting of the film is just stunning. And the film follows the protagonist Anna, who's a teenager, and she's in a journey of self-discovery, sexual exploration. And to sum up, really, it's a story of first love, but also of a community, this queer community that is interesting how it's portrayed, because it seems it's accepted in an island community. So we can already think like it's an island, quite Catholic. So your first thought is going to be that they are going to not have much freedom, but then this queer community is quite accepted, but then there's moments where we see that they are not fully accepted, and that there's a lot of tension between the traditional, more religious community and these new young people who also embrace tradition and religion, but also have a desire to express their identity and their sexuality. So I really thought that was very nicely portrayed, and with a lot of nuance, and is not a very experimental film. I think it has some sort of different touches, but I think is again talking about this blending of fiction and documentary, as she is a documentary filmmaker. She's definitely taken a sort of documentarian approach with her subjects or characters, and it really feels very intimate and close to the protagonist. I think this is one of the strengths of the film to me, especially when you're talking about a community that is not your own, a queer community in an island, and she really manages to get that intimacy with the protagonist, which I thought it was very powerful. And then also apparently the film sort of originated. So she was there for a residency, and then she came across these people, and then she established this relationship with the LGBT community there. And after the film, apparently she helped establish an association on the island to support the LGBTQ community there. So I think this is also very nice, and again another sign of the power of film and the power of cinema to actually bring people together that are really different. And I just really wanted to mention that sort of anecdote that was shared, not anecdote, but just result of the film that was shared in the introduction of the screening.
Yeah.
And I think, what do you think about the film, Amanda?
Yeah, I think we talked about this when we left. I liked it probably a little bit less than you did, but I thought it was quite beautiful, and I think perhaps I thought it was a little bit long, and the story. There were parts of the story I really got into and but it wasn't captivating me as much. Like storyline, it was a bit slow for me in certain parts as well, but made me want to go there. And I definitely applaud the cinematography and, you know, the filmmaking. So I probably liked it a little bit less than you, but still appreciate watching it, and would definitely look out for more work by the filmmaker. So for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I have a soft spot for like coming of age stories. So I think it's a genre that sort of naturally appeals to me, and this is one of them. And a sort of a coming of age story that, you know, focuses on a queer character, which is still not so, you know, widely seen. So yeah, I feel on a sensorial dimension, the film is very sensorial.
Yeah, agreed.
And the image is gorgeous. So yeah, I think it's quite a nice cinematic experience in that way as well.
Yeah, we talked about that, the interesting use of color and in the film, and costume, and also its tie to the very religious, you know, sort of culture that exists in the island. I mean, all of that was really, really interesting. It was very pretty, but yeah, you know,
it didn't do for you that much.
as much as you. I saw a lot of films that day. It wasn't my favorite, so it is what it is. But yeah, so, and then we saw a couple more as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so another program we wanted to highlight was the Helena Solberg program or retrospective. So this was part of the Essential Cinema Strand, and this was a program of two short films and a feature-length film by this director who's Brazilian. She's still alive, and she's probably the only female, the only woman director from the Cinema Novo Brasileiro, which was a movement mainly made up of male filmmakers. And in this program, we saw Noon and The Interview. So those were the two shorts, and then From the Ashes, which was the sort of longer one. And there was a very interesting Q&A after the film with someone called Mariana Cunha from the University of Westminster. So she really provided a good context of the filmmaker's career. And so this was a filmmaker that made most of her films in America. So she lived in America. And however, these two first short films, The Interview and Noon, she made them in Brazil, and I enjoyed from those two, the one I liked the most, if it was The Interview. Just she's interviewing different women, but there are different voices, and we are just watching her, an actor who's the director's sister, getting dressed for a wedding. So the identity of all these women is protected this way. And at the time, this was, I think if we watch it these days, it doesn't feel so new in terms of its form. But at the time, this was revolutionary in the way it was depicting women issues at the time. And also interesting to mention something that this expert on her cinema said was that because this director was focusing on women issues, this was not this wasn't considered political enough for the Cinema Novo. So that was something I found quite interesting, because I think Cinema Novo Brasileiro is considered quite political and revolutionary filmmaking, but not when it comes to women's issues, as usual. So yeah, I think that one was a very interesting watch. I think for me, what was really interesting about this program was the contextualization, which is something that, again, this festival and others, but I think a festival like this one that focuses on films that are different or not like definitely narrative, let's say, not narrative films, then it's very important to have the contextualization. I think only to mention, just to finish off, that the other one, From the Ashes, that was a film that she made in the States. I mean, she received public funding, right? From
it's on PBS. So PBS is our public kind of access television, or not public access, but public broadcasting, which would be more likely for you to see this kind of documentary program at the time.
So it's still it feels like TV documentary, but at the time when she made it, it was kind of coming from a need from her to sort of show like Latin America from a different angle than the one that was showed in America. So that's actually coming across quite well in the film, and I think that's quite interesting about the program, how these three films really show different examples of her filmmaking, some more experimental and some other more formulaic TV documentary type. But there's always this sort of, the driving force of her films was a feminist political aspect. So apparently, she's, as I said, she's still alive, and I think this film program might tour and it might get seen in other places. So it will be it's a great chance to actually see films from a filmmaker that is not being that widely known, not even in Brazil apparently. So she only became popular when she made a documentary of a popular Brazilian singer called Carmen Miranda. That's what made her popular in Brazil. So that's also quite an interesting thing, that her career is sort of more known abroad than in her home country.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it's not like my most favorite film, but I liked From the Ashes from the perspective that, again, having seen a lot of PBS films over the years, they're very formulaic, and there's a certain way that a documentary from PBS is often, perhaps actually in the 70s, they were maybe more experimental, and maybe that's, and sort of something to note, but 70s, early 80s. But this film is would have been very controversial, given the subject matter and whatnot, to have been on, regular terrestrial television in the US. And it really came to show an important information that clearly was needed to be said and expressed to a wider population. So just in the sense of having this as a topic is political and and not experimental but radical through the PBS television system, and to get that going. So I even applaud that, just to see how different it didn't, it maybe didn't seem like it broke a lot of barriers, but it certainly did within that structure. So I could see that, and I enjoyed that about that, with that contextualization, as you say. The other thing is, I really did like how much Helena focused on the family, and made very very so again, not this kind of talking head, I'm approaching it from a very sort of narrative, centric sort of thing, but to really follow a family and intimate sort of life, and how that was they were affected, and what their political beliefs were and stuff like that. I think for that time, that's actually quite innovative and whatnot as well. So I mean, or just on television like that. So I enjoyed it for that. Again, I wouldn't say, I would like to see more of her work, and to continue to explore it. And it was also nice to see the three different kinds of films So you didn't mention Noon too much, but I sort of liked that film because it felt like that, it was it was very short, and I really just very experimental in certain aspects, like the eyes of the children, and some very interesting weird shots, but cool shots, and it's maybe my kind of thing to watch weird experimental films from the 60s. So I enjoyed that as well. So I think that was a really interesting program, and like you said, the talk afterwards was probably the best part of it, because it brought all that together, and it sort of explained everything for us, and and that was really helpful.
Great.
Well, so that is the Berwick Film Festival, and overall we had a wonderful time, and highly recommend you checking the films out when you find them in up and coming film festivals around or online, and definitely check out the Berwick Film Festival next year, and we'll see you there.
This wraps our festival special on and March edition of the Cinetopia Radio Show. Overall, how did you guys think this Glasgow Film Festival was this year? I know you've been to Garry, I think you said it was your 10th, and Simon, I know you were very much saw quite a lot last year. So overall, what was your thoughts?
I think it's been a really strong year. Yeah, you're right, Amanda. I was going back through my site and figuring out when I covered it first time, and yeah, this is my 10th time covering it. And I think that the lineup's always great, and I love the GFT so much. So I always, even if I'm only covering the festival for a short time, I always like to try and get through there and get a film watched at the GFT, and really there's a good buzz around Glasgow when the festival's on. So I think it's really strong program. Still to see Polite Society, which is the closing gala, which I guess I'll see when it comes out on general release. And then the final film that I'm going to see at the time of recording, I'm seeing it tonight. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to The Five Devils by Leah Macias, who made Paris 13th District last year. Well, she didn't direct it, she wrote it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. There's still a few things in the program actually still kicking around that I want to try and catch. I know that Quentin Depu's got one called Smoking Causes Coffin. That's on my list as well to see. I really like his films. But yeah, I think it's been a fantastic festival. And yeah, we should also mention it's the final festival that Alan Hunter will be the co-director. He's stepping down, so I think shout out to how good he's been as a co-director. So I think it'll be Alison Gardner will be flying the flag solo, I believe, moving forward, or whether they'll bring somebody else in, I don't know. But yeah, they've got a great team, and it's always good fun.
Yeah, I was going to say it's his last festival, and he's always been a great presence around GFT. Like, he's always very enthusiastic about the festival and the films that the festival's showing. So I'm sure he'll be greatly missed. But yeah, I haven't been to nearly as many Glasgow festivals as you, Garry, but I think it's been great this year. Just a lot of really strong films and a good balance of films as well. Like, just in the films we've talked about today, there's been an interesting mix. The Quentin Dupieux film, I saw it last night. I loved it. It was kind of great to see it in a packed out cinema with a crowd of people, laughing and reacting to the absurdism of the film. Like, just I could gush about that film. Just no one is making films like Quentin Dupieux at the moment at all. It's a really smart, absurd kind of take on the superhero film. And it's worth mentioning the opening and closing galas as well. So the opening gala was Girl, which is a film set in Glasgow, following a woman and daughter, and their kind of relationship as the daughter grows and tries to protect the daughter. It's a really nice. They've just filmed Glasgow in a really interesting way, and it's a powerful film that has some terrific lighting. It just looks amazing. And I already mentioned the closing gala film Polite Society. I just loved it, like one of my highlights of the festival. It's a really fun film. I just loved it. I hope everyone who gets to see it soon.
Yeah, I mean, we agree. I think both Garry and I agree with you on Girl, because we did chat about it in the last episode. But this is really, it's just
Oh yeah, you reviewed it last time, right?
It hit me how many festivals are going on right now in March. I mean, so Glasgow Film Festival, we did just as did Berwick here, but just to put and then we actually found this news out about Edinburgh Film Festival coming back, and this month there's been really, really big news of and shakeups in terms of Christine moving to London Film Festival and Kate Howard's taking over. So lots of new news. I also want to push a couple other festivals that are still going to happen in March and you can still go see. So the Hip Fest is going to be in town of Bo'ness, and that's 22nd, I believe, to the 26th. That's all silent film festival and with live music. It's an incredible film festival in Scotland, and it's nearby. If maybe not the easiest to get to, but you can get there. And also Glasgow Short Film Festival. So Glasgow Short Film Festival is also the end of March, 22nd, I believe, to 26th as well. So you best check those out as well. And yeah, I think maybe we need to spread it out a little bit. There's so many happening in March. I've seen a lot of film in actual cinemas, in festivals, in spaces, in Berwick. It's been lovely. So it's been a great month for cinema in Scotland and nearby. But thank you both for joining, and thank you, Amaya. And we will see you next month.